Okay, welcome back to the We Win Injury Law podcast. I'm Tyler Todd, your host, sitting here with my co-host, Jaron the Snow Canyon Man Sandberg. Good afternoon, Jaron.
Good afternoon.
We've
I feel
been
like you need like a cool intro name because I get Jaron the Snow Candyman Sandberg. We need to do like, and it'd be weird to say maybe about yourself, but like Tyler the
triple
man
T,
with 3 first names,
the killer. No, I don't know.
Because how many times have you been called Todd in your life?
Almost every day still. That's okay. I don't need a nickname. It's
Triple
fine.
T. Well, at least give
It's
you something.
always been my nickname, Triple T, for sure. But
Tyler the Triple T Todd.
Well, thank you. I'm not going to do that myself.
I should do it then.
Okay, thank you. Hey, we've been talking about on the podcast all the different trials that are going on that are in the national media. And it's fascinating. You guys are seeing the Karen Reed stuff. We've talked about that in another podcast. We've talked about the Idaho 4 trial that's coming up here in August, and that's interesting stuff. And I think we would feel remiss if we didn't talk about the Murdaugh murder trial.
Yeah.
Because it's starting to like peak out again too.
Well, there's some appeals coming out that we were looking at the charges. Let me see if I can find the date on that.
And there's some good documentaries on Netflix about it. It's really an interesting kind of like story because it's, the Southern Charm family that's kind of the rich and famous, if you will, injury lawyer. So that's kind of interesting to us. And kind of see parallels about how this guy's life just spiraled, right? And he finds himself in jail, convicted of murdering his wife and son.
Yeah.
And it's just an interesting murder trial for all the different things we're going to talk about, all the reasons why they're appealing, and whether we're going to talk about what our opinions on that. But I think it just puts some perspective on life. And we as injury lawyers, and before we kind of jump into the murder trial discussion, it's really interesting when we talk about life. In fact, I was just talking to a friend of mine this morning at the gym, trying to hit the gym before I come into the office. And he was telling me that his brother-in-law just found this out. Like, I think his brother-in-law's in surgery, like as we speak. Was having some headaches for a few weeks, and then finally lost some vision in one of his eyes, which obviously was alarming.
Yeah.
He went in yesterday to get a CT. They found a massive tumor.
Oh no!
In his skull. Now, fortunately, it's benign, I understand, and so I think that's why I said he's in surgery. They're operating. He flew up to Salt Lake, and they're operating to remove the tumor. So, God bless him and his family. Hopefully, everything works out. But we were talking, my friend and I, on the treadmill, just kind of like it puts things in perspective, right? What's most important? And we work so hard to make money, to do all the things right for our families, and we think that we're doing the right thing, when in all reality, sometimes our families just want a husband. They just want a dad. They want you to be more present.
Yeah.
And you think you're doing all the things that we're supposed to be doing, providing, working hard, not present, because that's what we do to be able to provide. So we just had this interesting conversation of like, whoa.
What's the balance?
What's the balance? What's the work-life balance? And I think as injury lawyers, and we have to have that balance too of what are we doing? Why do we do what we do? Of course, we're passionate in our fight for justice, and that's our fight for our clients to maximize their compensation for injuries they've suffered due to the negligence of another, whether it be a car accident or slip and fall or premises liability, whatever it is, medical malpractice, whatever it might be. But to what end? And of course, our job, the end is to maximize the results for them so that they can get justice. But I feel like this murder trial is a good example of he just became, I think, in my opinion, we're going to get into it, jaded on what was important in life. Because there's how many charges of embezzlement and stealing, and to the tune of $18 million?
From his law firm.
And again, to what end? And I think one comment that was made on the treadmill this morning is, how much is enough?
Yeah.
And obviously there's
a balance, right? Because like there's the dad that's home all day long because he's out of a job and not working. And yeah, he can see his kids all he wants, but if they can't pay their bills,
Then he's like deadbeat dad.
yeah. But then there's the flip side of it where it's, we never saw dad. All he cared about was work and business and money. And yeah, I got to go to a private school and had everything provided for me, but I never saw him.
Yeah, we were talking on another podcast about the new show on Apple TV, Friends and Neighbors, with John Hamm.
Yeah.
And he's a hedge fund guy, apparently, and works downtown New York, Manhattan, and was never around, which led to the divorce. So his wife having an affair.
Well, and we've heard this from high-powered attorneys that we kind of look to as far as their trial skills and things.
Right.
You know, one of them, I think, told you personally, just in a conversation, said, yeah, but I lost a lot. And I think he was hinting at he'd had been married a couple of times.
Right.
And so I think there's a balance.
Yeah, there's a balance. So it's just, as we start this podcast, it's something to remember, right? Put things in perspective. Find what's most important to you. And this conversation this morning on the treadmill was, family. In my opinion, and my friend's opinion this morning on the treadmill, and I believe it's your opinion too, it's our families that are most important.
Yeah.
And so it's that balance, right? But as injury lawyers, we don't want to ever become too jaded. We want to fight passionately.
Yeah.
And we do fight passionately for our clients because we want to maximize justice for them. But we also want to make sure that their best, what serves them most, is also met.
Yeah.
And that sometimes is going to trial, sometimes it's not.
Yeah, and we've had that conversation with clients before, right? I've heard you, and I've said it too, is, look, a victory here is probably taking the settlement now because it's going to take 3 years to get to fully through a trial, and the upside isn't worth what you're going to have to go through. And other times it's, they're not offering anything. There's no risk, and there's only upside.
And there's nothing to lose. Yeah, for sure. And sometimes if we go to trial, or you're listening and sometimes you're getting some advice that it has to be done, sometimes you do have to do that, because you have to, if they're not willing to pay what's fair and reasonable for the suffering that you've been through, then you have to take cases to trial.
Yeah.
But sometimes that may not be the best result for you, because the only winners may just be the lawyers.
Yeah.
And that's also an analysis that we have to look at as well, and make sure that we're balancing our client's best interests when we do that. So just a little thought before we jump into this.
Dude, that was like a warm moment, the first of the podcast. Like,
well, it was a heart kind of
like,
a
let's
heart.
Start all the podcasts out with this nice warm fuzzy before we get into what today's is
you
like
feel
a
good
gruesome murder.
Well, it just hit me as we're talking about Alex Murdaugh, and he's an injury lawyer and appeared to have everything going for him and the perfect life, and how it all spiraled out of control, and why we're even talking about this.
No, that and you know, even recently we got new charges against the clerk of the court. There's some intrigue on this. I think it's going to get a little more attention as if there's any fireworks on appeal.
Yeah, so kind of break it down to a little summary for those watching if you're not familiar with the Murdaugh trial.
So this family is in this county in South Carolina.
Charming place.
And I think it's one of the poorer counties in the whole state, but
maybe not so charming.
But they're seen as kind of the elite, wealthiest family in that area. The Murdaughs themselves had been basically the elected solicitors for like 80, 90 years in this county. Well known. Everyone knew him. He'd worked at this prestigious founded firm. His initials, M, was one of the names of this. They had one of the biggest office buildings in the whole county.
And if I recall, they'd even made national news just years prior to this because of the son being involved in a boat crash.
Yeah.
And that made, if I recall correctly, that made national news.
Yeah. And the reason it made national news is almost like if Morgan and Morgan, John Morgan, if something had happened to him, because he's such a national figure, known as a national personal injury figure, it makes the news. Right. And I think that was one of the reasons because it was his son involved, it made national news. He's such a prominent attorney and
death was involved, and there was some weirdness about how the boat crash happened and whether the influence of the family,
So the basics to start is we have Alex Murdaugh, famous attorney. We've been talking about him for a minute now. Well-known family. And initially his son and wife are found dead on his property and out near some kennels that they had on their property. the initial news that follows when police arrive is, I wasn't even here. Someone's murdered my family. I went back and forth between the bodies. And his initial alibi, though, was that he's at his mother's house. He stayed there a lot, drives around a lot. And as more and more came out, and some of this kind of came out before trial, but his alibi did not hold up because his son had sent this Snapchat text message, which he didn't know that his son had sent, that shows his voice on the recording seconds before his murder. His dad's voice is now found. So now his alibi that he's told the police doesn't add up, which then leads to this whole other confession of, well, it was actually because I was embezzling funds from my law firm to the tune of $18 million, which is a lot of money.
That's substantial.
It's one thing to say, well, there's an $18 million settlement, but it's a lot. I mean, that's a lot of money no matter where you are. That's a lot of money to steal. Now, the videos I've seen of the house, it was kind of an estate style home. I mean, big home with kennels and, looks like horses, and there's a lot there. But at trial, he takes the stand, and that's, again, we talked about this in a previous podcast. When you're cooked, what do you
when
do?
You're cooked, don't take the stand.
Yeah.
But you say when you're cooked, you do.
And this goes back to, again, is he a likable looking person? I think he overestimated that as being this. Let's not
He's a ginger for one.
Let's not forget. Well, is it bleach blonde kind of? I think he was still trying to hold on to the strawberry blonde.
Gave me ginger vibes. That's why I was like, was he likable? Well, I don't know.
I mean, are gingers likable? Dislikable?
I think generally.
Let's not sugarcoat. We don't need to sugarcoat this podcast. We got to give it to people straight. Gingers. I don't know. Especially curly hair gingers. When you have it smooth and straight, a little different.
But I think generally likable.
But I think he way overestimated how likable he was because of the success he'd had maybe in the county and the influence of his family name. Way overestimated that he's on trial for murder and got up and basically sang this song of, I never would murder my wife and son. And
who would?
Which, again, every murderer probably tries to make that same claim. But then basically try to make it sound like, yes, they just had so much on him because more and more came out that he embezzled all these funds. He'd been disbarred from the state. You can't steal money from your clients, apparently. Apparently that's not cool.
No, you can't do that.
Can't do that. And so then their alibi was, well, my son had been involved in this boating accident that killed, and it was, let me go to my notes, 19-year-old Mallory Beach. There was a lot of people that weren't happy about that felt like his son kind of escaped justice because of this is an influential family, so of course he escapes justice. He's the son of this famous attorney.
And their housekeeper had died the year before.
They'd had a housekeeper die.
In their home.
So there were some things that happened that at least gave the inclination that, hey, maybe there's someone else that's mad at this family, this wealthy family, not me.
Right.
And I could never kill my wife and son. And to add on top of that, he has one son who then also came out, the one that's still living, came out and my dad would never do this.
And that's the position he's still taking, right?
Still takes to this day. And fast forward so then at the end of the trial, convicted on all counts, convicted of murder. And then also later convicted on the embezzlement charges. But now the appeals play out. And while the appeals are playing out, it turns out that the clerk of the court is been, let evidence get leaked out. And so she's been charged. This was a week ago, or two weeks ago on May 14th. She was charged with 2 counts of misconduct in office, 1 count of obstruction of justice and perjury. And his lawyers are basically asking for a new trial, arguing that this clerk of the court, because she's who leads the jury in and out of the room and goes back to the jury room and takes the verdict, that, she improperly influenced these jurors during the trial, and that she had a book deal in mind after that book deal was also halted because of allegations that she copied stuff. So a lot of stuff has come out of this clerk, and as the defense attorneys, they're loving it because everything that keeps coming out new about this clerk, that she lied about all of this stuff, gives some credence that at least the jury was maybe improperly influenced, that maybe that was what led to his conviction, not just that the evidence was overwhelming or there wasn't any doubt.
Right. Well, I mean, the key evidence, I think you already mentioned the Snapchat, which
the Snapchat was and they interviewed, this is where it's kind of nice that we're on the appeals process, because they did interview, some of the jurors have been interviewed now post, and they said, well, what was the key piece of evidence that convicted you? Every one of them that I've seen at least have said that video, the Snapchat video, because then it caught him in a lie.
Right.
Now he's lied about his alibi. There was other key pieces of evidence. So they had his car driving to his mother's, but they don't think he actually got out of the car, that he parked in the garage, parked in the driveway to add to that alibi, driving at 80 miles an hour down these country roads to get there.
Oh, geez. Okay.
And so but he had to answer those questions on the stand. And he just said, yeah, I drive what I drive. I drive fast. I have a nice car. That was his position
I always go 80 miles an hour down
80
country
miles
roads.
an hour fleeing from the scene. No, it was just I go down these country roads at 80 miles an hour. Who doesn't? I mean,
I do.
Right, Tyler? I mean, we talk about this in residential neighborhoods, the speed limit's 25, but I have a feeling that, every once in a while you go 80 miles an hour just because.
Well, especially down country roads.
Yeah.
You do.
I mean, nothing at night, nothing to hit. So
they had the gun casings there that matched the weapon or weapons there on the property. They have the pinging of his, I don't know if it's GPS or the phone.
Yeah,
but showing that that's not adding up. And then they
also found a blue coat, and I think they'd found it at his mother's house that had, what do they call it? Not ballistics, but
gunpowder residue.
Like gunpowder residue on the clothing that was his coat at his. And I think they tried to argue that, well, yeah, these guys go shooting. This is South Carolina.
His coat or
I'm pretty sure I thought it was his coat.
Well, I don't know, because I mean, we've talked about this in preparation for the podcast about alternate theories of, because he did admit to, when he took the stand, and of course you and I have different opinions on whether that's a good move or bad.
Yeah.
But when he took
most of the time we think it's bad, but it might be your Hail Mary attempt at a losing fight. That was my only. I'll say that's my
Hail
position.
Mary.
Hail Mary.
Hey, look, the Commanders, they won a game last year on a Hail Mary, and so look,
sometimes those Hail Marys work.
Yeah. So,
but the
when
game's
you're cooked, when you're cooked, Hail Mary it.
Yeah, but maybe it's when the game's close, when it's that last little. Maybe I'm wrong
they had
on my
nothing
theory.
to lose other than throw the Hail Mary, and it worked out. So I guess every now and then throw a Hail Mary, it might work out for you.
Yeah.
For him, it didn't work out.
It did not work out,
because apparently on the stand during his Hail Mary testimony, he was emotional. He admitted to lying, but then obviously, I mean, he denied doing it, but he admitted to lying. And I think, like, as you mentioned, a lot of the jurors, when polled afterwards, it said, yeah, that was the kind of
that lying was
what got him.
That video and his alibi then not adding up, and him changing his alibi, because this is again his age. I don't think he understood how Snapchat worked, because I'm sure he checked his phone, thought there's no photos or videos on here. He doesn't understand that Snapchat, is a video that's sent out over
right.
Online.
Do we know where the Snapchat was sent? Like where the son was?
The son had sent it. Like,
I know, just like a group or a thread or
I can't remember who it was sent to, but I know he had recorded it, showing the cute dogs. There's a dog in the video, and so we've seen some of that video, but I think it was just to a friend. But it's like a heartfelt video. It wasn't like anything weird, like, hey, this is my dad shot me, or it wasn't like that kind of thing. But it didn't add up to his story that I came home and found him murdered, because that puts him at the scene seconds before. So and there was, like I said, they do have him going. The prosecution's theory was murdered his kids, drove as fast as he could over to his mom's house, sat there, and then came back, and I found him now.
But why? And I'm curious. Please comment. If you're watching this on YouTube or TikTok or wherever if you're listening, wherever you subscribe to podcasts, please comment. Why did he do it? Because we talk about motive a lot, and that's what prosecutors are always looking for, because jurors have a hard, at times, disconnect between a conviction if there's not a motive, which doesn't make a ton of sense to me. But why did he do it? That's the question mark that I have. Because then we've talked about, well, did he cover something up for the
Yeah.
son?
So the prosecution's
Because the
argument,
son's saying he didn't do it.
so like I said,
Still,
the argument for the prosecution was that because of his financial crimes, that he murdered his wife and son to distract from those. And
that's
I just
a
feel like
crazy
that's
distraction.
I just feel like that's a terrible motive. Like
I feel like I'd get in a car accident before. Garner sympathy and delay investigation. I mean,
I just don't get it. So again,
that's a pretty aggressive move, don't you think?
Okay, Tyler, we find out that I've been stealing money from the firm. This firm's a lot bigger, so let's do a similar number because $18 million to that firm was very different because it had to go unnoticed. So if I stole $18 million, we'd know pretty quick. But apparently they didn't figure it out, and it had been happening for a long time. But I steal money, so then my way to distract from that is I murder my son and my wife.
And your wife?
Now, fake your own death or like fly to
Right.
Bermuda. I get all those. What
Or
you do
like
when you're embezzling
run
money.
into a tree, claim concussion.
Yeah, like, but I don't. I've always thought that was a very weak motive of this will distract. Now, more has come out again. He had an opioid addiction. There was other thing. He was claiming that he was fueling his. That was the reason for the embezzlement was because of an opioid addiction. But
And he's not a ginger? Are you sure?
he might. Maybe
it sounds like ginger behavior.
I'll pull a picture of him because maybe he is a ginger that's been trying to stay a ginger. I'll tell you, my grandma growing up, I used to be like, she has such cool like pink orange hair, and it was
sounds like
searching to be that ginger still,
like weird, odd, like it doesn't make sense behavior, like ginger
something
behavior,
like a ginger would do.
Yeah, I just wonder, if you can speak to any of that.
Yeah, ginger,
see, it's kind of
strawberry blonde.
Yeah.
Ginger.
I thought,
us
was that
gingers,
a selfie? That wasn't a selfie you just showed me.
Well, it was an age selfie.
Oh, yeah.
What I'll look like when I'm 66.
when being tried for murder.
Yeah, when I speak for all gingers, let me just. We don't always come up with the best excuses when we're stealing money, so we typically do go to let's murder people.
Yeah, that's what I was like.
That's like the so default.
Odd. But no, you're to your point. It's weird.
Like I said, I didn't like that mode. Again, we've seen this in a million. If you've ever watched Dateline or any of these, like when it's like cheating spouse, right?
Yeah.
I murdered my spouse because I wanted to be with new spouse, and I didn't want to have to pay spousal support.
It's kind of like the Scott Peterson trial.
Yeah, you've seen those, right?
Yeah.
Or wife is leaving me and gonna take the kids.
Right.
Motive, right?
Right.
I think most people are like, okay, not that it's justified, but that the motive makes sense. Here, it's just she stole a bunch of money. There's not even allegations like the son and wife were going to turn him in, or it'd be one thing if it was like they knew and were going to turn him into police, but they never made those. Again, it was just he stole a bunch of money.
You're kind of scratching your head like, hey, prosecution, do better.
Yeah.
Like that's your
best motive. So, and because they had brought up some character evidence, it made the trial did get extended significantly because they then brought in all those financials because the judge had ruled that none of that financials was going to come in. And then it got to come into his murder trial because they'd opened the door, because, we do these pretrial motions to exclude certain evidence because it's going to sway the jury in a way that's inappropriate. In this case, that had been excluded. And then because they somehow brought up his character, and my guess is during the stand and his own testimony, they got to then extend it because they got to bring in all the stuff. They got to bring in all the embezzlement, which again then leans towards if the jury didn't hate him already, they really hated him after that.
Money, let's be honest, money makes people do crazy things, right?
Yeah.
And so, 18 million, like you said, it's not an insignificant amount of money. And he's he's addicted to opioids.
Yeah.
So obviously money and drugs are going to make people do crazy things.
Agreed.
So, but the motive thing is where I struggle because it's just like, that's such a weird, like you pointed out, it's such a weird motive.
Yeah.
Oh, it was just for delay and sympathy. Like that's just, I guess, right?
Now, is he unlikable? Not because of his ginger hair, but just
right.
Because he's an easy person to hate, right? He's a wealthy person in this community that's seen as they're a poor community. He's doing crazy.
Well, and they're probably, I don't know much about the family, but they had a lot of weird stuff happen to him.
Yeah.
I mean, there were multiple deaths linked to their family.
Yeah.
They had, it sounds like they were, I mean, obviously his character
and up to that
had
point had been
integrity,
escaping justice.
and he's embezzling money, so he's not a good guy. And then if he is shooting his wife and child,
And
he's got a lot of problems.
And the shooting itself was kind of crazy too. So the son walks into this kennel, or anyway, surprises the son and shoots him. And then it shows that he's leaving this kennel. And then, and presumably the killer, whether it's him or not, then the son stumbles out still alive, which, at least as prosecution side, it surprised him. And he shot him again in the head. So it's like, and then with the wife, it was the same thing. Shot her in the stomach twice. Then as she like fell down, then shot him again. So again, it's not just like this very well thought out once. Again, it does seem like, and again, not like Contract Killer did it in a very movie style murder. This was a very brutal murder that, and I think switched weapons. I mean, it was very different. And the wife had come down to, because she heard the gunshots,
Right.
presumably from the son's murder. The bullet, and again, very gruesome. And, you know, when he took the stand, I've seen the video footage of it. You know, not that I'm a analysis of whether someone's being truthful. Very fidgety, looked at the jury in a very cold way. And then again, that might just be Ginger resting bitch face.
Totally,
you know?
totally. That's what,
Ginger
when you said that, I
RBS,
thought that immediately. Yeah.
But it really did. It did. If he wasn't cooked already, it cooked him way more.
Why
So it's,
do you think the son is still in dad's corner?
because it's not like he's got any assets to gain from dad, because everything's been seized at this point, presumably with the other charges. So there's not financial reasons for the son to still support dad.
Unconditional love. You just can't see dad doing that.
Yeah. I mean, I think for probably most, I mean, there's probably some families out there like, yeah, my dad, he was always an asshole and probably murdered people. Could murder someone, but
yeah, I think.
But in this case, it does. You know, he sees again. He still just says, "There's no way my dad did this. I know my dad. There's no way he could have done this." But again, blind. We saw this with. I don't know if you ever watched the Ted Bundy tapes, but even the mom, when faced with hearing her son basically confess to what he did,
still couldn't believe it.
And like the comment, I always remember this was like, so who's up for pie, to like these investigative reporters that were showing her these Ted Bundy tapes. So I think some people just, you see this with families of the perpetrators. You know, I just think sometimes they refuse to believe the truth even when it's flying in their face.
Right. Yeah.
I think about it like if my wife was charged with murder, I could tell you right now, like, unless it was me that she murdered, because let's be honest, that makes more sense.
Yeah.
But if it was like, I wouldn't believe it. I'd be
you wouldn't believe it.
Yeah, I wouldn't believe it. Unless it was me. If it was me, if I ever get murdered,
then no,
it was Callie. It was Callie.
Okay.
But otherwise, I couldn't believe it, right? It would be unbelievable.
Right.
Or like think of your dad, your own dad. Like, I could never believe that my dad could murder someone.
Right.
It's just, even in the face of overwhelming evidence,
right,
son to father.
Well, that's what I wonder, because, you know, as we're trying to kind of, hey, did he do it? What's, you know, he's denying it still, and appealing it. What's the disconnect?
Well, and we deal with this with cases, right? We even have in our contracts for clients, like, there's a value of your case. The attorney's fees does shift even for appeal, because appeals, just as important as the trial, is also making sure that trial withstands appeal. And so the prosecution, not only do they have to convince that jury and do all of the things that beyond a reasonable doubt this person did this thing, but we also have to do everything so by the book so perfectly that we can't argue things too extreme, even if the judge is on our side, because we'll get overturned on appeal.
Yeah, and that's what a lot of people don't understand is when you're talking about trial verdict versus settlement, there's a lot of people, I want my day in court. Let's take this to trial. Let's do this, and this. Well, a lot of people don't recognize and understand or even appreciate that you go to trial and get a really good verdict, it'll likely be appealed.
Yeah.
And so that's just another discussion that has to be had when you're weighing your pros and cons on how to pursue your case.
And my understanding of even one of the reasons they didn't charge him with potentially the death penalty was to avoid certain things that occur on appeal.
Right.
And so he got sentenced to 2 life sentences in for the murder of his wife and son, and then plus another 27 years for the embezzlement. But I think we think the same thing with our jurors is like, even going back to McDonald's hot coffee. What did that case actually settle for? We don't know. It settled for an undisclosed amount on appeal while the appeals was pending.
Right.
And we might see that with the Starbucks case. There might be you hope that it withstands appeal, but how many times have we been to a trial and the attorneys have, or not a trial, but a legal conference, and they've said, yeah, but the matter's still pending appeal.
Right.
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 And so then you're always wondering, okay,
what's the final number going to be?
How's the appeal looking, and
and how does that look to your client?
Yeah. What's it worth? Because we know they're reducing it in almost every case. You get a big verdict. To avoid the chance of it getting overturned on appeal, they settle for less. I mean, that's just the real. And it could go the other way because there's interest, building as well. But in this Murdaugh case, they're looking for anything they can on appeal. But even then, even if they win it, that's where it's just so bizarre to me. Like, okay, let's say you got something overturned or a new trial, you still have 27 years on a person that's already pretty old.
Right. And then they're going to just go down and retry it.
Yeah, they're not going to. He's already admitted to all the other things, to all the financial crimes, because that was his alibi for why I didn't murder my kids. So then he's still got 27 years on top.
He's not appealing that.
So even if he gets a new trial and some different outcome, he's still got 27 years in prison. So I just don't get why spend it on appeal. Anyways.
So he's cooked.
He's cooked.
Yeah.
When you're cooked, you're cooked. He's so cooked his hair's turning white from all the ashes. No.
Well, it's just it's interesting how, and we've talked about Idaho 4, we've talked about Karen Reed, we've talked about this one, of course, we've talked about Starbucks verdict in March, about the hot coffee, hot tea. It's just interesting because like I said, Scott Peterson, that's an interesting trial as well.
Yeah.
And Lacey and how that I think there's a documentary on that as well.
Yeah.
I think on Netflix. It's fascinating. The motivation of people and why they do crazy things. Because even then, I think most people, that when they see that or they even hear the Scott Peterson trial or murder or other like cases, and maybe not even to that extreme, right? I think most people will say, why didn't he just leave her?
Yeah.
Why didn't he just divorce her? He had to kill her like on Christmas Day or Christmas Eve, whenever it was.
Yeah.
Like, that's just next level crazy.
Yeah.
And what, how and why?
Yeah, because sometimes the motives make sense, right? But in some of them, you're just...
Well, there he had like a mistress or girlfriend.
Yeah.
Right. And so he maybe just didn't feel like there was a way out because he also had kind of a socialite family.
Yeah.
Right. That he had, that it looked bad.
But again, going back to this case, you just look at it and you go, your way out is to murder
your wife and kids. And
it's so risky. Again, as attorneys, we're so risk adverse, right? That's the only time we really take a risk is when we're going to trial. But for the most part, the majority of cases settle. It's not just us, it's everywhere. Because we're taking away the risk of rolling the dice at trial with what a jury's going to do. And sometimes we know more, but I think it just seems such like there's so many other things you could do when you've stolen $18 million and have a drug addiction.
I guess if you're going to take anything away from this podcast today is put things in perspective.
Yeah.
Like if you're looking to make a really aggressive move, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's really okay. I think we think the worst and we think that people are going to think the worst. And that's probably not true.
Yeah.
The sun will come up tomorrow, to quote Annie.
Yeah.
And
also a ginger.
See? One of the most famous, I think.
She's really done a lot to advance the ginger.
Yeah. So all that stuff we said earlier about like your mindset.
Yeah, don't forget Annie. Come on.
Don't forget Annie. Because she really had a positive outlook.
She did.
And no, I mean, so I do believe like it just, for whatever reason, life can get overwhelming. I had a conversation with a client this morning. It can get overwhelming. And you kind of have to just compartmentalize different things and not take things so seriously. And I just don't understand how people feel like that's the way out.
Yeah.
I think we as humans are more forgiving than we think others will be. And if you follow Jeff Fisher on Instagram or TikTok, or he's a lawyer that's
Yeah.
kind of become like this motivational speaker on how to deal, like how to have hard conversations, or how to have, you know,
Yeah.
have a legal conversation, and then just kind of skyball or from there.
Yeah.
But I mean, and I was kind of scrolling through some things that he was saying recently, and I believe that. I mean, he kind of said, "Hey, I think what I was watching was, if you start with someone, like when you have to bail, right? And everyone does this. Oh, I can't make it, or I got." He said, "Start with, you're going to be disappointed, but I can't do it."
Yeah.
Or, "I made a promise to myself that I wouldn't like go beyond 9 o'clock, so I got to be home.
Yeah.
I'd love to come out, but I made a promise to myself." And people were more like, "Oh, keep your promise.
Yeah.
That's not a big deal." And I think the point what he was trying to make was, people are more understanding than we give them credit for.
Yeah.
And they're more willing to give grace than we're willing to give people credit for.
Yeah.
And I think that your loved ones and friends are more loving and understanding than we're willing to give them credit for whatever reason.
Yeah.
So I don't know. As injury lawyers, kind of like this one kind of struck home a little bit, because he was, and I think that he's got jaded and just spiraled from there and got out of
Yeah.
control, and it just couldn't, and we all have friends and family that might have a life situation that it's spiraling. And I think the only thing we can do is just let them know that, hey, we love and support you. What do we do to stop the spiral?
Yeah.
It's okay. And
taking it out on your wife and son is probably not the solution.
probably not the solution. If you get anything from today, don't murder your wife and son.
Yeah. The son is what shocks me. The wife, no, because like I said earlier in the podcast,
he doesn't mean that.
If
Callie.
I get murdered by
mean
Callie, less surprising. But to your own kids, that's just brutal. That's narcissist. I don't know.
It's all of it. It's just
it.
horrible. So anyways, stay tuned. We're going to kind of check in on the appeal, how that works. And we're going to update you guys on the Karen Reed stuff. And we've got a lot more cases to talk about, civil cases with big verdicts around the country and different things that are happening, cases that we're dealing with on a daily basis, because we do this on the daily. And we're talking with clients. We're talking to defense lawyers. We settled a nice case today for 6 figures. And working with that defense lawyer was very nice to work with.
Yeah.
So we do this stuff every day. And that's why we have to tell ourselves every day, maintain perspective, don't get jaded, you do what's right. I was just reading a book recently about, and I feel like I'm 5 chapters in, and I feel like the only thing I'm getting from this book is like, go to therapy.
Yeah.
Like, just be a good person, be a good dad, be a good husband, be a good partner,
Yeah.
be a good person, because that's what's most important, is to be a good people, be good people, be a good person, be kind to your family and those around you. Everyone's going through something. Maintain perspective, and hopefully that's just, remember that. Subscribe, please. Like us, follow us, subscribe. And until next time, everyone be safe. In the famous words of the crime junkies, because I think they do a lot of good work with their podcast. Is it be rude, be weird, stay alive?
Yeah.
Be rude, be weird, stay alive.
I like the last one.
I'm not going to copy
I like
stuff.
the last one, stay alive.
That's all crime junkie stuff. I'm not trying to but they make excellent points. So until next time, you guys, we win for you, period.